What's up, y'all? This is John and Mike back for another episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. And I want to apologize for not being live on Millions. We've kind of switched up the way that we set up the live streams, and I dropped the ball on that. Some would say that I have Arian Smith hands recently when it comes to getting the show produced. But I'm trying. Life happens. But tonight we are going through all of the changes over in Tuscaloosa with recurring guest Cody Goodwin from the Roll Pod podcast and Bama 247. We're also going to talk a little bit about baseball, probably some softball as well, but that's going to be towards the end. Last reminder to vote for us for Connect Savannah's best podcast, Twitter and Instagram. But before we get into the rest of the show, how's your week and what are you drinking?
Week's good. I just got some water yet again. Uh, nothing in the house. Side of that, just working and stuff. There's not really too much going on. Baseball season again. I always keep bringing up baseball season. We lost our first game on Wednesday to a pretty good team. Then we're gonna play the city champs on Monday. But then Wednesday, that should be our. We should win that game.
Oh, there you
Not,
go.
not, not. I mean, looking ahead a little bit, but first two teams we played for the championship last year. So with a bunch of kids that haven't really played baseball before, I didn't have too high of expectations, and they exceeded them on opening day. So yeah, we're just going through that. How about you?
Good. I played in a disc golf tournament this morning. It was a doubles tournament, which was cool.
Oh,
Um, we finished one under par on a course that was a total of 3.5 miles for 18 holes.
damn.
Um, yeah, so I walked almost 4 miles by noon today. Um,
Okay.
so my feet are currently cramping and turning themselves into pretzels right now. I should be drinking water, but I'm not because I'm not a real adult. I'll drink a liquid IV or something later.
There you go.
Um, but no, dude, it's been good. I'm glad that it's finally warming up over here in Savannah
Mhm.
because normally I would have already been wearing shorts to work, but I'm finally getting into it, which is nice. Um,
But you know what? The bad thing is the damn gnats. Like our first game, like I went through a whole bottle of like bug repellent like for me and then like the team and like it didn't do any good.
yeah, no, I had to put bug spray on for that tournament today because it rained half of the week here.
Mhm.
Um, oh, yeah, and I walked that almost 4 miles with wet socks and shoes. So
Oh,
that
gross.
made it pretty gross, but it was fun. We didn't win because they were professionals playing as doubles teams in this tournament.
Hmm.
Um, so just kind of is what it is on that part. When a good drive for me is like 300 feet, and there's guys that can throw five. Um,
Seems like it's a bit of a disadvantage, yeah.
yeah, yeah, but it was a charity tournament. All the proceeds are going to a veterans charity, so regardless of winning or losing, it was for a good cause, and I had a lot of fun.
There you go. That sounds good.
Yeah. Um, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about baseball? Because I do have something to bitch about right off the top.
Yeah, we can do that real quick, yeah.
So baseball overall had a good week. They had a 4-3 win over Presbyterian on Tuesday before getting just demolished by Michigan State, the 2-5 team that we said Georgia should have beat the hell out of.
Yeah.
They didn't. 19-6, and then Friday, Georgia started a three-game series against Georgia Tech. The Friday night game, if you haven't seen it on social media, Georgia Tech demanded that the game be played, even in the rain. Georgia was like, "All right, cool, we'll start the game." Um, the problem is that when Georgia Tech was getting beat 9-6, going to the bottom of the fifth inning, Georgia Tech refused to carry on with the game. Just said, "Nope, not doing it. We quit."
Mhm.
And because it didn't go far enough into the game, it's not a Georgia win, and because it was raining, the NCAA just called it a suspended game that could possibly be continued later in the season.
Yeah.
It should be a forfeit. If one team is on the field and the other team refuses to finish the game, that is a forfeit.
Hmm.
I love that Wes Johnson, the new Georgia baseball coach, went out and just roasted Georgia Tech for that. I love it.
Yeah.
Like that's the fire you need in a rivalry. But put that to the side. Georgia was beating the shit out of them, and then they went on to win the game, a low scoring game, 3-1 yesterday. Um, and then today they were down. They were not out. Came back to win and sweep the series of finished games, 11-9, Rec Tech.
There we go. Back on track.
Yeah, so Georgia at this point is 10-1 on the season. Should be 11-1, whatever. If Georgia Tech and the NCAA want to be little bitches about it, they can be little bitches about it.
And there's always a chance they finish up that game at some point, but kind of just judging it by how it's gone the first, well, the last two games, I'm sure Tech isn't going to be super eager to try to make room in their schedule.
No, no. I will say playing. They're going to Augusta to play Georgia Southern on Tuesday, and then they got a Stetson game Wednesday. Stetson has already beaten two SEC teams, so don't let that sneak past you. And then weekend series against Northern Colorado. Did not know there was a Northern Colorado University. Um,
We're just going after all the northern teams, whether it's in their name or Michigan State or whatever.
Fuck them Yankees. Oh,
There
hey,
he
can
is.
you hear
Okay.
us?
Yeah, I got you now.
All right, cool. How's it going?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. How are you guys doing?
Good. Glad that it's
Yeah, I can't
finally
complain.
warming up down here in Savannah.
Hmm. For sure.
We finally got a little bit of heat today, but it was mostly overcast.
Yeah, it's I mean, as soon as it gets above 65, the gnats come out, but I'd rather fight
Hmm.
gnats than have 100% humidity and 40 degrees.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, but we're welcoming back Cody Goodwin, Bama 247 Roll Pod podcast. Um, I mean, we've been talking about this really since like the week after Saban left, trying to figure out a good time to get you on, and kind of talk about the craziness that went on in Tuscaloosa. Um, so just give us a quick rundown of like how long do you think people around the program knew it was happening before it happened?
Um, well, I think we've gotten to talk to a few former players just between like the Senior Bowl and all those guys were at the podium at the NFL Combine this past week. And hindsight's always 2020, right? But a lot of them have said that like, yeah, like kind of looking back, they can understand a little bit about maybe they can better see or better, some of the signs that maybe they saw during the regular season. Just kind of Saban maybe being a little bit more connected to the team, or maybe, not necessarily doing things out of character, but, really trying to work a little bit harder than maybe he had in years past. Some of the players that we've talked to, they have basically told us that, looking back, it's easier to kind of connect the dots a little bit. I don't know that anybody fully 100% knew, but some of the veteran players have definitely said that like this past season was a little different compared to maybe some others. So it kind of makes sense that he decided to step down.
So how much involvement will Saban have with the program going forward, and how much has he been involved in the transition thus far?
Yeah, I think Kalen DeBoer at his opening press conference promised 100% access, right? So Saban will be around. He's going to have an office at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Him and Miss Terry very much big part of this community with the Nick's Kids Foundation, and just some of the other things that they've been doing, because it wasn't very long after they first arrived that, the whole tornado, ravaged through Tuscaloosa. And they were, a really big part in, just kind of helping instill, good spirits and helping clean up. And just bringing the community back to their feet, right? So they'll be around. I know that they have a house in Jupiter, Florida now, so you know, they'll probably be back and forth quite a bit. Seems like Nick is enjoying golfing in his spare time, so I imagine he'll do quite a bit of that. In terms of like actual football, I don't know that he's going to be around that much. I know he's told DeBoer and all the coaches that, hey, I'm a phone call away if you need questions. And a lot of that is probably more, at least some of the assistants that we've talked to and some of the interviews that they've done, more calling Nick to kind of, pick his brain about his players, right? Just kind of like, what is it about this player? What is it about that player? How'd you get this guy to tick? How'd you get this guy to motivate? Little things like that. And then I think what Kane Womack, who defensive coordinator now, they run similar defenses. So I know that he has told us that he's gotten Nick on the phone a couple different times just to talk scheme and talk ball a little bit. So in terms of day to day, I don't know that he's going to be around a ton, but he'll make appearances here and there probably. He was at the basketball game on
Yeah.
Saturday when Alabama hosted Tennessee. So him, DeBoer, their wives, and Jalen Milroy, I think, all sat in the same spot. So he'll be around, but it's not like he's going to be, a constant shadow over DeBoer's shoulder.
So we've been big fans of Kalen DeBoer really since we started the show, especially with how Washington was able to turn around the program in the 2022 season. But how did the fan base feel about the hire immediately after it was announced?
There's a fair amount of skepticism, because you look at some of this guy's track record, about some of the things that are maybe a little bit more important in the SEC than maybe they are in other conferences, right? Like I think recruiting, obviously, lifeblood of college football, it's big everywhere, whether it's, Pac-12, Big Ten, SEC, whatever the case may be. And this guy didn't, DeBoer didn't have, I think, the best track record of recruiting kids just in terms of, to the level that in the SEC that you need to compete, right? That's something Nick Saban did year after year after year after year. I want to say like 16 or 15 of his 17 years that he was in Tuscaloosa, his recruiting classes were either ranked first or second, right? So like that's what he's been able to do. So there was a little bit of healthy skepticism on that part. The other thing too is like this guy has been a head coach for just 4 years, two at Fresno, two at Washington, a lot of success at every stop. I think that's, the optimistic fans, the guys who are excited about him, pointed to his overall record, right? He's like 104-12 as a head coach. At Washington the last couple of years, 25-3 overall. They won, I think, 21 in a row, which, end of last season, then into this past season where they went, 14-0 and made the national championship game. So, I think they're, the initial wave of sadness, right? But then these are college football fans, right? So they immediately shift into like, oh my gosh, the portal's open. There's still recruiting battles going on. Who's going to be the next coach, right? And so, shortly after that, DeBoer got installed, and yeah, it was a pretty good mix of like, skepticism, but also excitement because they had seen what he had done. But then there's also these other little things that they pay a little bit more attention to, and maybe didn't have the best track record there. So, but I think as he's gotten the staff together, landing Ryan Williams right to kind of shore up the 2024 class. Picking up some portal pickups, some kids from Washington that are coming in, plus that Michigan safety, Keon Saab. I think as he's gone about the job through these first couple months, I think people are starting to get a little bit more excited, and spring ball starts on Monday, right? So that's where I think a lot of the attention is going to be. What's this team look like? Who's where? What does the defense look like? How's the offense coming together? So I think, this is another opportunity, I think, for DeBoer to maybe build on the excitement part of it as opposed to the healthy skepticism.
So, question kind of off of that. There were rumors about other coaches being interviewed and turning down the job, most notably Dan Lanning. Eh, what is kind of the I guess behind the scenes, or as close as you get to behind the scenes, what's kind of the truth behind that?
Um, so best I can explain this is that, I guess where should we start? We have talked with Alabama athletic director Greg Byrne, and so that's kind of he's slowly kind of led us behind the curtain a little bit about the process. It sounds like just based on interviews that he's given and some of the comments that he's made to us, he had, he kind of had the last few years as Saban got older and the questions about his potential retirement kind of swarmed or kind of got, bigger or louder. He Greg Byrne, Alabama's athletic director, started kind of making a short list, right, of guys that, okay, if it were to happen this year, who would be first on my list to contact, right? And so like he kind of had a running list over the last few years, and it's, shipped and shaped and it's, different names on and off depending on, just college football and coaching movement and this, that, and the next. So you've got, he's got a list over here. It finally happens. And, I want to say, I'm trying to remember the exact date, right? So Nick Saban officially retires on the 10th, right? That's when the announcement comes out. That's when Chris Lowe sends out the tweet. And then from there, Byrne and, it sounds like phone calls were made, right? Like there's some obvious ones, right? Like you got to call Kirby because he was a long time defensive coordinator here. You got to make him tell you no. I don't know if they actually called Kirby. Steve Sarkisian, I'm pretty sure some sort of contact was made there, right? Because he ended up getting a massive extension within those same couple of days, right? Same thing with Dan Lanning, right? Oregon, very much heavy on the social media about him staying. But the one thing that had always kind of been interesting, and this was more like in the back of our heads a little bit, like Kalen DeBoer, after, all the success he had at Washington, they had actually organized a new contract extension for him that was going to, I think more than double his pay, something like $9.4 million per year. DeBoer had not signed that at the time that all this Nick Saban stuff comes down, right? So, as Burns probably making his calls, making the rounds, I'm not officially 100% sure who he called, but like, again, with a lot of the new contracts, a lot of coaches got around that time, you could probably, put the tea leaves together a little bit. So, and then obviously DeBoer ended up getting the call, getting the full interview, and less than, I think it was like exactly 49 hours from the time they announced Saban's retirement to when they announced DeBoer's hire. He's in Tuscaloosa. I think a lot of people thought Dan Lanning would have been, kind of an easy answer or the easy answer or the most like logical answer when you consider, he's a defensive first coach. He had previously been on staff here. He had also previously been on staff with Kirby. It made a lot of sense. I'm sure he got a phone call. But, or at the very least, I'm sure he was on Greg Byrne's list, right? So I guess I don't know that we can 100% confirm who got a phone call and who didn't, but it would have made sense that Dan Lanning would have been on, Greg Byrne's list. And it did make a lot of sense. Like in my head too, I was, defensive minded coach, roster stocked. He's obviously done very, very well at Oregon. So like that would have made a lot of sense. There are a lot of coaches that also fell into that category too, right? Like Steve Sarkisian was held in very high regard after he got done being the offensive coordinator down here in Tuscaloosa. Kirby, obviously, like Alabama would take him in a heartbeat. I don't think he'd ever leave Georgia, especially now with what they've got rolling. But a lot of coaches made sense. Like you could have made cases or arguments for a lot of coaches that made sense. And I think DeBoer, what makes DeBoer so interesting, at least to me, is that he obviously offensive minded, right? So that's okay. That's a little bit different, right, than maybe what we were assuming or what Alabama's obviously been used to. But I think, as and this is a little bit more big picture college football, like between NIL and the transfer portal seems like college football, there's a lot more parity, right? I think we saw a lot more parity this past year, at least like some of the best, like the better teams, like top 10, 12 teams, a lot more parity. And so when the playing field is that much more leveled, right? It's not just like Alabama and Georgia hoarding all this talent. Like once, when there's a lot more parity like that, what separates? Well, coaches that are really good with X's and O's. Enter Kalen DeBoer, right? Like that's kind of his calling card a little bit, offensive wizard, masterful play caller as an offensive coordinator for about a decade, has won everywhere he's been. And you look at, what Fresno was able to do in his second year, what Washington's been able to do the last 2 years. Like a lot of it is, he's very, very good with the X's and O's, great with play calling, great with getting his players in positions to make plays. And, so from that end, I'm not sure how many people maybe thought it would have been DeBoer, but, now that he's the guy in charge and you kind of look at, Greg Byrne's track record and, maybe where college football is going, it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, any coach that can make Indiana look good is a good coach.
A lot of those coaches that were on that staff are now in Tuscaloosa. Like we were cracking jokes that like, who'd have thought that, Indiana's 2019 coaching staff, the bulk of those guys were going to be the guys to replace Nick Saban 5 years later. Like it's crazy.
Right. Was Lane ever a realistic candidate for that job, you think?
To my knowledge, no. I don't know that he was ever on Greg Byrne's list, which means probably didn't get a phone call. I understand why a lot of Alabama fans probably wanted him to at least be considered, right? Because of, a lot of success at Ole Miss. For as much as him and Nick butted heads when he was here, he did kind of help Alabama kind of transition into that like second era of domination, right? After they won the first 3 and 4 years. Everybody remembers the Nick Saban press conference. Like, is this really where we want football to go? Okay, I'm going to hire Lane Kiffin and beat you guys doing that way too, right? And so, I think a lot of people, I understand why Alabama fans probably wanted him to at least be considered, but to our knowledge, everything that we heard, it doesn't sound like he was ever a legit candidate.
So, oh, you already answered that question without us asking it. Has there
Coaching one
been?
was kind of a ramble. That's my bad.
No,
That was all
I
good.
we love it. We love all the information. Has there been a push to increase Alabama's NIL presence?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
And it's not even like just because they hired DeBoer and they're bringing in a new staff. Like they were definitely pushing it hard the last year and a half, of Saban's tenure. I think it was we were actually cracking jokes because right after the Rose Bowl was done, we saw like the content manager for Yay Alabama, which is Alabama's NIL collective. Um, that we saw their content manager posted a video like within 10 minutes of the Rose Bowl ending. Like it, and we were cracking jokes that like, oh, this is like a super PAC going to work after somebody loses like an election or something. Like it's just like, hey, like it was a great season, yada yada, but we need more, right? Like that's, I don't know. We thought it was kind of funny, just the parallels between the two. But yeah, I mean, they've been hard at work, trying to increase that, right? I think one thing that really kind of or at least I don't want to say it came to light, but it was probably like a discussion point that, for years, Alabama maybe didn't have to have as good of an NIL program as some of these other schools. Like a lot of schools probably needed their NIL program to help, kind of level the playing field a little bit. Like that's kind of part of that equation. Some of them just needed them to compete, period. Alabama got away with like we called it the Nick Saban tax. Like they got away, or the Nick Saban discount, excuse me. They got away with that for years. They didn't really have to build it up as much as some other schools because Nick Saban was there and he was killing it on the recruiting trail, right? And they were kind of selective in the portal, but some of the portal guys that they got made huge impacts, right? Like Jameson Williams, Jameer Gibbs. They had been very, very good about, so they just didn't need the NIL part of it. But I think they kind of saw how it was impacting other programs, right? Like a Texas, like Michigan, what they were doing up there, like Oregon, obviously with Phil Knight right there in your backyard. Like there's obviously they kind of saw what was coming a little bit. So the last year and a half of Saban's tenure, they really have made a push to increase it, and I think that's just only going to continue now that DeBoer's here. So it's not where they would like it to be, but they're definitely making a push of trying to make it better and try to get it to maybe not the size of a Texas, but get it to where it can make a noticeable impact.
So a lot's been made about Ryan Grubb's arrival and then eventual departure as Bama's offensive coordinator. So will former Michigan quarterback and new Bama play caller Nick Sheridan be running the same offense as Grubb, or is there going to be some kind of I mean, it's not going to be all him, I should say.
Yeah, well, I think new offensive coordinator, right? Nick Sheridan will probably have his own wrinkles, but like the basis of the offense, like it's DeBoer's offense. It's the same offense he used at Sioux Falls, the NAIA program that he led to 3 national titles in 5 years. Same offense that he used when he was the offensive coordinator at Eastern Michigan, Indiana, Fresno State. Same offense that Fresno ran, same offense that Washington ran. Like it's kind of a spread pro style, or maybe a pro style with some spread concepts in it. That's at least how he's described it to us. So um, as long as DeBoer's there, I'm pretty sure that's what the offense is going to be. Which is, that's one of the many things we're looking forward to about spring, right? Because it's easy to just kind of, okay, Milroe's going to play the Penix role, and Jeremy Bernard, who transferred in, is going to play the Roma Dunze role, and I don't think it's going to be that like one for one, but we're kind of curious to see like, okay, like Alabama's got very, very good running backs this year. They're young. How is DeBoer going to factor them in, right? Like Milroe was fantastic last year, but they had a guy transfer in who redshirted at Washington last year. They've also got Ty Simpson still in the room. Is there a quarterback battle, right? Because it's a different offense, so you probably need a different guy pulling the strings there. Who's going to be the alpha at receiver? Alabama struggled on the offensive line. They lost one tackle to the NFL draft, another one through the portal. What's that going to look like? defense is going to look similar, but there's a lot of young guys that need to step up and fill some pretty big roles, right? Because the secondary especially got hemorrhaged through the transfer portal right after Saban retired. So a lot of questions. I mean, I know went a little defense there, but in terms of offense, we're curious to see how that whole puzzle is going to come together and just kind of how DeBoer is going to use this personnel. Because I think this was another point, why are people excited that DeBoer's here? He's routinely and has a track record of doing a lot more with a lot less, right? Like Alabama's the most talented roster he will have ever had in his coaching career. So what are you going to do with those toys and those pieces, right? Like that's something we're really excited to see come together in the spring.
So back to Grub just a little bit. Was that whole ordeal as shady as it seemed from the outside, or was it just the way that the pieces moved and the timeline moved?
What how did it look shady?
What is it, like 2 hours before the portal window closes, he finally takes the Seattle
Yeah,
job?
yeah.
Um yeah, I guess that looks kind of weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, that
It's tough.
seems real shady, and just from the outside, you know.
Yeah. No, I mean I get it. And everything that we've heard is that, DeBoer kind of always knew this was a possibility. I think it was Austin Mack, the Washington quarterback that transferred in, he redshirted last year. I think he even said in an interview somewhere that like when Grubb recruited me, he said, "Hey, I'm gonna be your OC for a few years. I may not be your OC by the time you're done," or something to that effect, right? So I think DeBoer knew. I think Grubb knew, right? Because I think, and a lot of us, I think, were shocked that maybe Ryan Grubb didn't get the Washington head job. So,
Yeah.
we were having to monitor that after DeBoer got the job down here because it's like, okay, is Grubb going to come with him as the OC? Is he going to be the head coach somewhere? I knew his name had been kind of floated around in NFL circles too. So, just other things that we had to pay attention to during the process. But, I think DeBoer was more or less like, I knew this was kind of coming. And it sounds like he let Grubb interview during the process and stuff like that. So I think what we were most curious about is like, they're just now getting around to announcing all of these staff hires to be official. Um, we're kind of curious, like, because like Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff, for example, the offensive line coach that went with Grubb to Seattle, they were out recruiting. So like they signed something, like whether it was a term sheet or like a 30-day contract or something specific, or that allowed them to recruit with Alabama. I think that's what we're more curious about, right? Because if you sign these guys to a contract, there's maybe there's not an exact buyout, but it's a little bit more official. So that's it like a month-long contract? Was it a term sheet? Was it whatever the case may be? We had also heard that like Grubb's buyout from Washington included like a stipulation that like if you took a college job, the buyout factored in, like the opposing school would have to buy you out, but if you took an NFL job, the buyout's like null and void. So like was DeBoer trying to do him a favor by like, okay, you're not taking a job here, but you're also working here for that, they're like, while you're here, while you're interviewing, and then, we'll worry about the buyout if we cross that bridge, right? And they end up not crossing the bridge because now he's in Seattle. So we had heard that as a possibility, or at least that was something that also kind of popped into our heads. So yeah, I mean, I get it. Like it looks goofy. But I think internally, I think they were prepared for something like that, whether it was the Washington head job or potentially going to the NFL.
All right, so let's get into some of the roster turnover with the regime change. So since the SEC championship, Alabama's lost a total of 30 guys to the portal, according to 247, including quarterback Julian Sain, offensive tackle Caden Proctor, safety Caleb Downs, safety Jake Pope to Georgia, and then wide receiver Isaiah Bond. So, which player departure hurts Alabama the most in the short term?
Caleb Downs, right? Like that's gotta, it's you can make a case for a few others. Like I think there's actually, there's a pretty strong case if you're talking short term, like Amari Niblack going to Texas, the tight end. What is Amari Niblack, who's 6'4", 230? What does that look like in DeBoer's offense, right? Same thing with Isaiah Bond, right? He's slot receiver, really came on late in the season. I think there's also a case potentially for Caden Proctor. I know the starting left tackle, I know he struggled a lot during the year, but by November through the SEC championship game, I thought he was more than serviceable. I thought he actually turned into a very good left tackle. So now they don't have any left tackle really. So like that's a big hole. You can make a case for Trey Amos, who the cornerback that transferred to Ole Miss. He was in line to be cornerback one. And when he walked out the door and along with, I think it was four other cornerbacks that transferred after Nick Saban retired, 11 total defensive backs, I'm pretty sure left Alabama's roster, both before Saban and after Saban retired. But, now they don't have, and the only experienced cornerback I think Alabama currently has in the room is Damani Jackson, who transferred him from USC, and he struggled a lot last year. So, you know, hole there. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys you could probably make the case for, but I guess in terms of short term, like Caleb Downs has the I mean, you could probably make the case now that he's probably the best pound for pound college football player, which means he will be in a position like that, or one of the best pound for pound college football players for the next 2 years, right? So like that's hard to replace production and football IQ like that, right? Like that's, plus I really liked watching Caleb Downs play. So I'm a little upset that he's gone too.
You don't want to make a case for the center being the most important transfer?
Seth McLaughlin has a lot of experience. And when he left, like some of us on the beat were like, okay, a lot of people are happy that he's gone because of the snapping issues, especially in the national championship game. But like they didn't have a center with experience after that guy walked out the door. And so like, they got Brailsford through the portal, so it worked out. But yeah, a lot of Alabama fans, he was always good to me. Seth McLaughlin was. A lot of Alabama fans were very happy to see him hit the portal. Put it that way.
I made the argument that if he was a guard, he would probably be a top five guard in the country if you just took out the snapping portion of his job.
That's a fair argument. I could see it.
He'll probably do that at Ohio State, I would think, right?
We're under the impression they recruited him to be the center. So Ohio State will go under center, right? Like in terms of like, quarterback snapping and whatnot. So like maybe he won't have as much of an issue. But whatever, they'll deal with it.
I do have one question that's not in there. So
Yeah.
Georgia fans went through this with A.D. Mitchell when he transferred to Texas, and I think most of us are still referring to him as a damn good dog because he is. I mean, he played a vital role for them in two national championships. Isaiah Bond, obviously, he had that big iconic play, 4th and 27 or whatever the hell it was, 4th and 31.
4th and 31, yeah.
But how are Alabama fans going to treat him when they play? I don't know if y'all play Texas this year. I guess you don't. But
no, they play Oklahoma this year.
Yeah. But is there going to be, I don't know, like not a hatred, but like just kind of a weird cloud over that since he's go into another SEC school?
The diehards will, MF that dude to kingdom come. Most rational fans, at least like a lot of the fans that are on our board, at the time that he left, like that was, I think Bond entered the portal the same night that Saban retired.
Yeah.
So at that point, there was a lot of confusion where, okay, who's the coach going to be? It's a bummer that he's leaving, but a lot of them brought up 4th and 31. A lot of them brought up, one of the I think it was the late touchdown drive that Alabama had against Georgia in the SEC championship game where he caught 4 passes on that drive, right? And he almost scored a touchdown to take the lead, right? He got him down to the 1. I think a lot of people, I think, are going to view Isaiah Bond probably in the same way that you guys view A.D. Mitchell. Like, hey, like that dude gave us a lot of memories. He is going to be an Alabama all-timer, because of 4th and 31. They wish him well as long as he's not playing Alabama. One of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So Bama got 8 guys in from the portal so far. You already talked about Keon Saab. 4 players from Washington. Tight end Josh
Cuevas,
yeah, right.
Okay. I was hoping somebody would pick that up for me. Offensive lineman Parker Brailsford, wide receiver Jeremy. Is that
Jeremy? Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy Bernard, quarterback Austin Mack, and corner from USC Damani Jackson. Which one of those guys do you think has the biggest impact this season?
So I think it's okay. Brailsford coming in, like that's big, right? All Pac-12, freshman All-American. I think Pro Football Focus rates him as the top returning interior offensive lineman in the country this year. So that's big. I'm not sure we'll see a lot of Austin Mack. I'm not sold on Damani Jackson just yet. LT Overton, I think, is stepping into a really big and important role where he's basically, after he committed to transfer. A lot of even me specifically, he looks like he could fill the role left by Justin Eboigbe, who's on his way to the NFL now. He's not quite Eboigbe size, right? Like LT Overton's like 6'5", 265. Eboigbe's 6'5", 292. So, not quite as big, but he's a productive player when he's healthy. And he's going to have to step in and, not that he has to be the only one to kind of, produce what a Boydby did this past season, but that's an important role, like being out there as the true defensive end, not one of the edge rushers. And Boydby did a lot for Alabama's defense last year. So that's, somebody needs to step up and try to match that production. But yeah, Brailsford on the offensive line, I think you can't understate that. But I am very intrigued to see Jeremy Bernard just because he's a receiver coming in. He spent a year learning from, the trio of receivers, Adunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan. He knows the offense. So like he's going to help the receivers figure out, what they need to do on any given play. It makes sense if he becomes the alpha of the receiver room this year. I'm also really excited to see Keon Saab, the safety from Michigan. Alabama's secondary took a massive hit, right? I said earlier, like 11 transfer portal departures, since I guess the portal opened in early December. So now you bring in an experienced player, played 13 games for Michigan last year, including both the, semifinals and the national championship game. So that's a lot of really, really good experience coming to a position group that really needs it. So there's a lot of the transfers intrigue me in case I didn't make that clear.
Jalen Milroe is a notable name that did not enter the transfer portal, even though on the surface he doesn't necessarily seem like a fit in the way like the Michael Penix type mold that was so successful for DeBoer out there in Washington. So should we expect him to be the starter when Georgia goes to Tuscaloosa this season, or is there another name that we can keep an eye on that's like a realistic possibility that's on the roster right now?
That's a great question. I think so. We've been doing like I guess last week. So we did do last week we did a bunch of like pre-spring positional previews and who's in the room, who left, who are the new guys. And one of the things we did as part of those previews was one big question for each positional group. And my one big question for the quarterback room is there a competition here? Because that's, and that sounds really goofy, right? When you think of Milroe, he led Alabama to 12 wins last year. He led them to the SEC championship. He was picking up first place votes in the Heisman Trophy race, right? So like, a lot of reasons to believe that he's probably going to be QB1 when spring opens up. My question as to whether or not there's a competition here is like, I guess the other thing maybe playing like one of the reasons Milroe got the job a year ago, was because of his legs, right? Like he could both extend plays when protection broke down, and it often did because Alabama's offensive line struggled a lot last year. And he was also a legit weapon to run with the ball too, which he did, right? So like dangerous guy who, probably the best of not a lot of great options just given the personnel on the rest of the team. Milroe proved to be a pretty good quarterback last year, right? Like that's well established. The Heisman Trophy votes, 12 wins, all that. And the cool thing about DeBoer coming in is that he has a history of maximizing quarterback skill sets, right? Like even, like I'm not sure Penix was nobody I think really kind of saw he was going to be the superstar that he was going to be, mostly because of the injuries. But, one of those things that you kind of have to see. And then we saw it for 2 years and he was with the right coaches and the right offense and it worked. He also did that at Fresno. He did that with Peyton Ramsey on and off that 2019 Indiana season. They played both him and Penix, right? So he's got a history of maximizing, what his quarterback can do. And that's a really good thing if you're Jalen Milroe, but only if you're able to keep the job. Because DeBoer has said that his offense can cater to a lot of different quarterback skill sets. But given the wide range of skill sets, like currently in the room, because you've got Milroe who, he's a fire-breathing weapon when everything's clicking. You've also got Ty Simpson, who I think is maybe a better pure passer than Milroe, right? He was a 5-star recruit. He's still in Tuscaloosa. You've also got Austin Mack, the guy that transferred in. He redshirted last year. He knows the offense. He also followed DeBoer halfway across the country. How DeBoer decides who should be quarterback one, just given their skill sets, what he needs out of this offense, what he believes the strengths of the offense is, like the offense is. So like once you identify the strength, okay, what do you need at quarterback so you can maximize that, right? Be kind of interesting to see who he ultimately chooses. We think Milroe is probably going to start spring ball QB1. How it looks by the end of spring ball, I think will be really interesting. And, we're probably not going to learn a ton from their spring game and some of the scrimmages that we're going to get to watch, but we might learn a few things, So we're rolling with Milroe for now, but we'll see where they're at the end of spring. It's a good observation.
Okay.
So Alabama obviously loses a ton of guys to the draft every year, but how are they going to replace guys like Dallas Turner and Kool Aid McKinstry?
Great question. I mean, they've got a lot of, they recruit edge rushers every single year, and they, had the two best edge rushers from the 2023 class, right? Keon Keeley and Yonze Pierre. Those guys redshirted this past year. They've got other talented edge rushers in the room, like Quandarius Robinson. He's coming back as a fifth-year senior. Keanu Cott, who was kind of the third edge rusher, I guess, behind Braswell and Turner. Didn't get to play a ton last year, just because Braswell and Turner were probably the best pass rushing duo in the country. But also, Alabama didn't really blow a lot of teams out, right? So you kind of needed all those A guys, especially like during the SEC schedule. You needed the entire A team defense out there all the time. So there's a lot of talent in the room at edge rusher. There's just not a lot of experience. So, like, of the many things that we're really curious about, who's going to be the edge rusher? Who's going to be the top edge rusher, right? That's what we're kind of curious about for spring ball. How is Kane Womack going to use the edge rushers? He runs a similar defense, but there's going to, as to what Saban ran, but there's going to be some different wrinkles and stuff that he's going to, use, and different buttons that he's going to press. So, how does he use the edge rushers? Edge rusher is also kind of one of those, like, it's one of those positions we kind of have lightly circled as a position group to watch during the spring transfer window, because we think there could be more defections from Alabama after these guys go through the spring. They figure out kind of where they're at in the pecking order, and do they want to stay? Do they want to go? Edge rusher could be one of those positions too. So a lot of talent in the room. Not sure who's going to step up. Not sure who is here in the spring is necessarily going to be here in the fall. So going to be interesting to see what they do.
What regular season record would it take for Alabama to try to go on a witch hunt to fire DeBoer like Auburn tried to do with Brian Harsin, noted non-Southerner as well?
Um, Anything worse than 6-6, Tuscaloosa will probably burn down. Honestly, like, he's a good enough coach that, like,
Yeah,
anywhere between 8 wins, I think, might be considered maybe not a disappointment, but like, okay, there's a little bit more work here than maybe we thought. Um, but like, 9-3, 10-2, 11-1, like 11-1 would be like, holy cow, like, which, pretty tough schedule coming in. Like, that'd be a great season. 10-2, thumbs up, did your job. 9-3, I think, also a thumbs up, did your job. If it's only 7 or 6 wins, I think there might be some concern, but I'm not sure that they would run him out after one year. Unless he went 5-7. At that point, all bets are off.
yeah.
What is kind of a realistic expectation for this team with what we know right now?
Um, you in terms of like record,
Yes.
I think 9-3 makes a lot of sense. They have to, they host Georgia, they have to go to LSU, they have to go to Oklahoma, they get
And they
Mizzou
have to
at
go
home.
to Camp Randall, which is going to be crazy. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, right. So like that's probably going to be the first, like, hey, where's this Alabama team at, right? So like it's a pretty tough schedule, all things considered. So, um, so I would say right now, like 9-3, like big thumbs up. It was probably a pretty good year. Because 9-3 also puts you kind of on the cusp there, the 12-team playoff too. 10-2, I think you're probably in the playoff, and I think you have to absolutely give it an A. At worst, I guess B plus. But I think right now I would say 9-3 probably sounds about right. So I think once DeBoer kind of figures out what he's got offensively and just kind of how they put the puzzle together defensively, I think it'll start slow, and then it'll end, I think, with an exciting finish, if I had to guess.
I think that's it. Unless you have anything else, John.
No, I think that's it. We appreciate you coming on and talking to us as always. Um, I learned a lot, and I went from Alabama's not going to be good this year to, oh crap, are they still something to be concerned about?
That's how we
They
were going in the SEC championship when we talked to you. We were so confident, and then as soon as we got off the phone, we're like, "Fuck, here we go."
To be fair, like the Alabama team that was there at the SEC championship game, that was the ceiling, right? Like
Yeah,
that was, because you knew in order to beat Georgia, you're going to have to play at a level that is going to be required to win a national championship too, right? So that's as good as we've seen them play all year. Um, but yeah,
And
no, I mean, there's going to be a lot of toys that DeBoer's going to get to play with. I don't know that they're going to be quite on the tier of like Texas, Georgia, I guess we'll see where Michigan's at, but like Ohio State, Oregon, like that's probably a decent preseason top four right there. I don't know that they're going to be on that level, but the level right below them, like, yeah, I think they'll be pretty good.
Do you
I,
think they'll? Is it realistic to think that they could still be a playoff team in 2024 with the expanded playoff?
Ask me after September.
There we go.
well, we're probably going to be talking in
Yeah.
early October, so
Yeah, no, we can do one before that game and after that game because I'm sure we'll learn a lot about Georgia that game too.
Oh yeah.
uh, I are there any? And this is way kind of off topic, but similar conversation. Is Alabama thankful that they're missing Ole Miss this year?
Maybe. Um, I would have liked to have seen it because like it always seems like Nick knows just what to do to frustrate Lane.
Yep.
And so like I think that was more or less the case this year. Like either like because look at what Ole Miss did to every other team except Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah.
Like that offense was next to unstoppable. And for whatever reason, like Nick shut it down. Like Saban, like that defense just shut it down. And like, obviously there's talent all over the roster and all over the defense between the edge rushers and Kool-Aid and Terry on at corner and Caleb Downs doing his thing, like, not discounting that, but just like, dude, you held him to 10 points. I don't know that they had 100 yards in the second half. Like I don't
Right.
know. It would have been really interesting to see it. Um, but I think also Lane's probably a little happy that Saban's not coaching anymore.
Absolutely.
For
I think
sure.
he may be the happiest coach in college football as soon as he saw that tweet.
Yeah. Well, he still got to deal with Kirby, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, we appreciate coming on and talking to us. Is there anything you'd like to plug before you get out of here?
Nah, man, just I appreciate you guys having me on. Always fun talking ball. But yeah, we're still doing the thing at Bama 247. We're on socials. I'm at Cody Goodwin. So we got spring ball coming up, and this is going to be one of the more interesting spring practice periods, I guess, for really any team in the country, right? Because it's Alabama. Nick Saban's no longer there. Kalen DeBoer's there now. I don't know. I feel like Alabama's going to be under a microscope, and we are going to cover every inch of it at Bama 247. So come along and enjoy the ride with us.
Did you say Bama starts spring practice tomorrow or Monday?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So I think we get to meet with DeBoer like 5:30 ish, I think, because they practice in the afternoon. So we get to see them after practice. So we only get DeBoer tomorrow, though. So I don't know how much we'll learn, but we'll try.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, have a good night, and we'll be talking again soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, fellas.
Thank you.
Yeah, that I feel like every time I talk to him, it goes from Bama ain't shit to damn it.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that after we got off the after we got off the Zoom with him before the SEC championship. Like I said in the interview just a moment ago, and then it ended up working out for them again. I sat there and watched I watched the Rose Bowl highlights again just to see like Alabama's last game, and yet again I sit here and I'm like, how in the fuck did Georgia lose to this team?
You put
Oh
an
my God.
inside linebacker spying and covering their best receiver at the same time, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't go well. Make an impossible choice, you're always wrong.
I mean, they sacked Milrow like what 5 or 6 times. Like they were just eating him alive, and then he was just
Hmm.
bad turnovers, and like that's what should have happened in the SEC championship.
Yeah,
No turnovers. He played a perfect game for well as perfect as Jalen Milrow could play. But
they gave him some Mike secret stuff, and the rest is what it is.
hmm golly, man.
Do you want to finish up real quick about baseball? I know there was a real long interlude there. So after this weekend, Georgia starts SEC play on the 15th in Lexington against Kentucky. I have not done very much research on Kentucky just yet, um, but I do want to hit on softball for a minute because the ladies were ranked number 3 in the country going into this Stanford Invitational that just finished up today. And of course, the softball page does not want to load for me right now, so give me just a second. Um, I know they won. They lost one game against Cal, who was a ranked team. I'm trying to pull up and see what they did today, but I guess my internet is not wanting to work.
Uh,
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Um, Georgia lost to Stanford in the final today.
mm,
Um, so three losses on the season. Still going to be ranked top 10. These girls definitely have a chance to do something special this year. So I just want to reiterate: watch Georgia baseball and softball. They're on ESPN Plus, and I believe the revenue they get from ESPN for people watching the game helps the program. So you know, do what you can to support those guys. And yeah, I think that's it.
yeah, just remember to vote for us for Connect Savannah. We got by the time y'all hear this, like 2 more days. I think voting ends on
The
Wednesday.
sixth.
Yeah, Wednesday the 6th at midnight. So again, vote early, vote often, vote every day.
Yeah. I do have something I'm pissed off about this week. Just a little. Just a
Mm.
little. Um, for all the amazing things that the human body is capable of doing, why is it that it smells trees at a certain time of year and starts attacking itself? Like,
Self-hate.
Kelsey hasn't been able to breathe through her nose for like 4 or 5 days. She had to call out of work because her sinus infection got so bad she was running like 102-degree fever.
Good Lord.
I'm sitting here struggling to breathe through my nose, got a little bit of a headache, and it's just because trees are blooming. Why? Why? Like women's
Yeah.
bodies can make other bodies inside of them. Your bones can heal themselves, but you smell trees and you're like, nah, dude, I'm gonna shut you down. You can't breathe. You can't eat. I'm gonna give you a headache for a week. Sucks to suck. Trees smell funny.
It's fun. Oddly enough, this is the first like last week and then this week is the first time I felt like I've been able to breathe since like Christmas. So I don't know. I don't know what the fuck I'm actually allergic to.
And honestly, I don't either because since I moved to Savannah, I haven't really had problems. You know, it's always when I go. Oh shit! I was in Charlotte last weekend.
Oh,
That's why I can't breathe. I was about to say it's always I'm good here, and then I go up north somewhere to Atlanta or Charlotte, and I
mhm.
come back down and can't breathe. But now it makes sense because I was in Charlotte last week, and I'll be in Atlanta this weekend.
There
So
you go. Damn.
yeah, so be prepared for me to talk like this next week because I won't be able to breathe, and it's stupid. It's stupid.
Mhm. It is
I
stupid. I agree.
Yeah, like I. That's it. That's what I'm mad about. But as always, guys, follow our social medias at nothing.finer.pod, at finerpod on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Search us there. It is Nothing Finer Podcast on TikTok. We have one of those now. Check us
Mhm.
out there. We are going to start putting clips up of the episodes on TikTok. I dropped the ball. Like I said, I got butterfingers. It's really just football season is our playoffs, and that's where I get everything rolling. It's like certain receivers once late season rolls around, just got that playoff energy once we hit September. But I'm gonna start getting on that. So as always, guys, remember there's nothing finer in the land.
Then a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.